go for it.
Hi, and welcome to the personal side of business, where every business has a story. Today, I'd like to welcome Dr. Deek Marcus, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in psychology for business executives. Welcome, Mr. Mark.
Thank you, Jed. I appreciate you having me here today.
Well, tell us, how did you get here?
Well, so I've been a licensed psychologist for 8 years, and this is actually my second career. My first career was actually in business, and I was an IT executive for many years, if not decades. While I was in that role at various levels, I noticed people would always come up and talk to me and just kind of chat or check in, about professional stuff, but also about personal lives too. So eventually, I became a manager and I started working with people. And then I thought to myself, being driven and motivated that, maybe I'd like to go back to school and learn some other skills and get a education in psychology. So I started with a master's degree, and then from there I went on to get my doctorate degree. So eventually I became licensed and I retired, I'll say, from my corporate life and started my own private practice, utilizing my obviously psychology, but also my background in business, IT, and finance.
What was that moment that you felt was crucial to you wanting to switch? Like, was there an example, a very specific instance that this is the moment I wanted to get into psychology?
Well, it's probably having a lot of meetings with different people, and sometimes in the corporate world, those meetings aren't the most productive, shall we say? They're a little bit haphazard. There's really no definitive goals. People might be just kind of filling time. So I got to the point where I thought, I could be more purposeful and have more meaning if I was able to help people one on one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And what is a demographic of business execs that you like to work with?
yeah, so executive psychology for business leaders really focused on those who are probably high achievers, people who want to get better at their trade, whether business or leadership in the business world. Work with a lot of high level executives, C levels, but it could be for anybody in business who wants to get better at their craft, become a better manager, understand people better. So it's meant to fit a lot of people in the professional world.
And let's kind of break down the different areas where business execs might be lacking and need your assistance or get into psychology for them. So let's talk with emotional intelligence first, right? Let's explore that. Can you tell me more of how that could be missing in a business exec and how they can get help with that?
Absolutely. When I think of emotional intelligence, I think of like how you understand yourself, but also how you understand other people as well. I think for all of us, we all have like strengths and weaknesses, but we also have like places we need to improve on, and if the more we could kind of understand those areas for ourselves, the better job we will do in our role or as an executive. So filling in those gaps, I mean, it could be like not listening to people as much as you should, or it could be insecurity about not doing the right thing, or it could be just basic things like prioritization, not knowing exactly which things to work on first. So I encourage people to kind of have the emotion intelligence for themselves, but also some of those same principles can be used for others, whether it's coworkers or employees or other people they run into, such as customers, right? Oftentimes you see people triggered by certain statements or situations, and understanding kind of the root cause of what would make somebody react would be a helpful thing to help guide them through it, build some rapport, and keep moving forward in a positive way.
And these are usually done in multiple sessions, right? And people don't just show up and in one session can change their emotional intelligence.
That's correct. It takes some time and practice. Usually start off with a session trying to understand their background and understand their stressors, look at their weaknesses, and basically goals for the counseling as a premise to kind of lay out the kind of treatment plan and work we want to do together. But I mean, with any kind of counseling and therapy, there's no definitive time frame. Could be months, could be years. Also, when you're feeling good about yourself and you feel like you've kind of worked on all those areas of improvement, it's also a good idea just to kind of check in and do some analysis on yourself, kind of like a car. Even if it's running perfectly good, you might want to take it in, check the oil,
Yeah,
check the wheels. We
yeah.
should do that for ourselves as well.
And that emotional intelligence, does that actually start to spill into other employees and people in the workplace? The If you work on yourself, let's say I needed that emotional intelligence therapy, and I started working on myself, does that have a ripple effect into the other people in the workplace?
Absolutely, that's a great question, Jet. It's definitely like setting the culture for a place. Is it going to be a place where people listen to each other and kind of take into account the nuances or what they're saying? Do they build rapport with each other? Do they work as a team? I mean, even the best teams have maybe some arguments or conflict, but can they resolve them, get through them, and move forward? So I think the more they have this premise of emotional intelligence, the better off they'll be, the workers, probably the workplace as a total, and the general environment people are working in.
Yeah.
Once you kind of set a good culture, usually people want to stick around, stay with the company, and work towards the goals that are set forth by the higher ups.
Yeah. And when we had talked before, you'd brought up that sometimes the things that are happening that you need help with, uh, psychological and then emotional, these things were done when you were younger, right? As a child, things that were happening to you as you're growing up. Are people that you've worked with, are they aware of these things that are like, oh, this is happening? I'm not communicative because of this relationship I had with my father or mother or brother or sister.
So they might actually know their behaviors of like, I react quickly when people criticize me, or I really people don't listen to me at all. They might kind of know their behaviors, but they may not know the actual root causes, which is usually sometimes from childhood, from parenting, although a lot of parents do a great job. I mean, as we know, it's not a
Yeah.
perfect kind of science to be a parent, so I'm sure they all do the best, but sometimes these wounds are, as I originally stated, complexes show up and people aren't exactly aware of why they have why their behavior reflects to that regard. But the more you become like what I call bringing some of the unconscious material to the consciousness, then you could kind of like, catch yourself and like, oh, I realize I'm here. I'm not doing a great job, maybe listening to people here. So let me pull back and take some time and then, do a better job and try to understand this person who's like sitting across from me.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's speak to a little bit to the isolation of someone in that role, right? That's something you deal with. Can you explore that with me a little bit more?
Yeah. Yeah. Isolation, I mean, probably comes in different formats. I guess for the high level executives, the C levels, it's probably making these really tough decisions for other people where you might feel a bit alone. I suppose for the entrepreneur, it's a little bit different. You may not be making decisions for other people or the greater good of the company yet, but you might feel like you're all alone on the journey. One of the things we kind of work with archetypes, basically themes that we see through human existence. And when I think about isolation, I think this idea of like the adventurer archetype. Basically, back in many hundreds of years ago, as an explorer trying to find a new area or route a new map or understand different places they'd never been to, and that itself has a sense of isolation. So that adventure archetypes kind of built within some of us, where we're willing to take that journey alone. That's where the isolation comes in. But the more you kind of like understand, some people are built for this adventure and isolation. The more strength you can pull from, people's experiences of getting through the other side, basically getting through the isolation and having a successful company or making an important decision or have a team around them as well. And so eventually, you have to think of isolation as somewhat temporary. Like to think eventually you're going to build out your business, or you're going to make that important decision and communicate that to people and kind of recalibrate with everybody around you. And so
Yeah, and those that isolation feeling, is it um emotional, mental, and physical? Is it all three, or do you concentrate on certain areas? Like if we start on this, it will have a ripple effect into other areas to help.
well, usually look at the isolation as probably, emotional, like being alone, you know, like who's on my team, who I'm going to bounce this idea off. What should I do? Is my idea right? You could obviously find mentors or people who traveled a similar path and bounce things off them. If that helps kind of reduce your sense of isolation. I physically, yeah, I mean, you could be working by yourself. Obviously, you could find a community to work with, or a shared workspace to kind of have other professionals around working. So physically, it's somewhat perhaps a little bit more manageable than the emotional. It takes a little bit more work. Also encourage people, even though they might feel isolated professionally, they have like other parts to themselves. Like they might have a family, or they might have a friends, or they might have hobbies they enjoy, that you could find the sense of community and the togetherness outside your professional identity at the time.
Does that start to happen when someone gets into that position of being an exec, and then they start to get isolated, and then it grows even further from the things that are meaningful to them, like family, like the home life, and now you feel further isolated from everything?
Yeah, when you get to the level of executive, obviously you have a time commitment and I guess a responsibility commitment too, to tend to your job and make these important decisions, whether it's about money or people or benefits or crisis situations. So yeah, like I think we all see people who are attached to their phones, and whether it's text or emails, and doing business on the weekend and all nights and interrupting time with their family, and time they should kind of hopefully recharge and unwind at these times. So it's important, as I alluded to a little bit ago, is like these other identities of yourself. Not just the professional but the personal. Taking care of yourself. I know it's hard, but it's a good idea to have some boundaries with your work. Granted, if you're C-level or if your own company, you might get a little bit more squeeze than somebody who's not as on the top chair for sure. But boundaries are always good. I mean, I guess it's that idea of taking care of yourself a little bit should make you more formidable and less stressed, hopefully in the business sector, and you could be a better boss or a better coworker or a better employee to the company.
Yeah. And can we talk to some of the stressors that you have experienced with clients that end up bringing them to you? Or like, this is the kind of the max, the threshold that I can take with all these stressors that come with a job?
Yeah, a few come to mind, Jet. One is this idea of the imposter syndrome, where they become into like a new role, or they become a C level and they've never done that before. So a lot of people feel like they don't have whatever the cloud or experience to excel in that role. So a thing we work on is obviously confidence, finding that confidence in ourselves, of perhaps looking at over other achievements in our life, difficult times of transition where we felt, it was difficult at first, but as time goes by, if it gets easier, we feel more confident. And eventually we don't think about being the imposter anymore. Another one is with the entrepreneur, it's the idea of like wearing many hats at the same time, because you're probably president and a CFO and probably employee all at
Yeah.
the same time. So it's kind of making specific goals and themes that you want each kind of role to be if you're wearing many hats, and kind of chop the wood every day. So you kind of work on each little section at a time so you don't get too overwhelmed by focusing on one of those hats you might be wearing at a time. A third thing I see is also somebody who's been in a role for a long time. They feel comfortable and confident, but then they're not as excited, right? It's the idea of lacking that challenge eventually. So we look for ideas of growth, new challenges for them, perhaps mentoring other people, because I think like as we go through our own journeys in life, the idea of growth is important. So, especially, high achievers, they usually want to keep growing in some format. So, even though they might master a certain area, such as like sea level, or they always want to keep growing and, advancing themselves in some regard, whether it's professional or personal at the time.
Have you ever dealt with someone who was not able to grow anymore? And maybe if there's like such a thing as a peak in that business sense, and then they become emotionally depressed or mentally depressed from that, like maybe that's as far as they go in that career.
You do see that. Obviously, they may become like depressed or down or bored, or it might manifest in different ways, or just lack enthusiasm, or maybe snap at people because they're not feeling as valuable or as worthy as they used to. So, at that point, regarding like feeling down, it's going back to maybe having meaning and purpose in other ways. Like, I mean, if you're really great as a CIO, you have all the IT chops going for you. Can you pick somebody out to mentor and kind of groom for your own space eventually, right? Or
Yeah.
can you, think of other people who need different skill sets of like maybe some other people need to run meetings.
Yeah.
Can you help mentor them and let them take over for certain meetings or give them more empowerment? So that's good for them. It gives you a new activity to mentor and discuss. You could kind of obviously watch them grow in the meetings or the roles you give them. So,
Do you think there is a correlation between how you deal with that mentality of what you're able to achieve and what you have achieved depending on your age? As you get older, if you're like in your 50s, 60s, do you feel like it's not about the career anymore? It's about giving back and mentoring other people. Do you think there's some correlation between that?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as people, reach the goals or objectives in their life, not that being a high level executive or CEO level is everybody's goal or needed to be. There's obviously plenty of other goals in our own lives outside business. But I think there is that need to, generativity, like having generations come after you and, take the lead, or, have them achieve success in their own regard. When you're starting off, it's a lot different. You're probably focused on
Yeah.
yourself. You want to be, do a great job on your projects. You want to be acknowledged for your work to do. So it takes on different kind of focus based on the level and time and career, which usually aligns with age.
Yeah.
There are people, as they get older, perhaps they're not into the mentorship and they look for the next rush, the next
Yeah.
company, the next job, entrepreneurship, something that gives them a new thrill. So,
Does that become harder to uh, say coach and get them to that specific place if it's not so much about the mental and emotional side of that being as opposed to someone who's always chasing a career path or the high of doing something more in a career, or not matter?
it's probably up to the individual. I mean, we're all reinforced by certain things. I mean, I guess when we think about a job, it's the idea of like money,
Yeah.
salary, benefits, titles. Like it's a natural reinforcer. But if you could like step back and be like, well, what are some of my intangible reinforcements of a job, right? Is it building a culture?
Yeah.
Is it having a successful team where you could delegate and it will be done for you,
Yeah.
right? So you could look for other reinforcers in the professional role that it may not be totally tangible at the time, or the idea of like having your employees, come up to you and, appreciating your ability to be their boss or really like working with you or talking about what you meant to their career and stuff like that.
Okay.
So
And now let's talk to that aspect of it. If someone is able to make a huge difference into a workplace once they've changed themselves, or a company pulls in someone that can have that effect on a whole entire company, what is that like in your eyes? Like what would be the ideal person that walks into a company and says they've changed the culture, they've bring this positive attitude, great communication? What does that ideal structured person look like to you?
so it could go both ways, Jet. One, it could be that person walking in with natural leadership abilities, and that could come, sometime at a young age or something they developed over the years. Just an example for myself was like when I got out of my undergrad, I started with a company of two people. It was like a sales guy and a programmer, and they had no template to the business they were running. And they came out of they were actually Steve Jobs' salesmen, and they got based on Steve Jobs' second company, Next Computers. Things happened, and they had to go on their way, so they became entrepreneurs. And so those two people I met, relied mainly on the sales man's charisma and his vision and his like undetermined positivity and belief that this could happen for him. So we relied on him to move us forward. And so, and at the time, remember, he didn't, I think they had an office with like two desks in a room. That was about it. They had no customers, they had no software. They just had their own vision and their own skills to make this happen. So that guy's ability to lead and have a vision definitely, you know, embedded that culture of that company, and they grew that company from, I guess, the three of us to 50 people.
Wow.
So
So you think the having a few of those key aspects can be strong enough to carry a whole entire company. Like you don't need to have everything in that to be that high level exec. You can start to grow in different areas, but you just need some pillar values of who you are to be able to move forward.
uh, the idea of like understanding oneself and the
Yeah.
strengths, right? Like
Yeah.
he had vision and positivity and energy, right? And he was going to make it happen. You know, like when you get to that point, you have pretty good pillars, but there's probably other gaps to fill in too.
Yeah.
Like as I said, maybe it's um, understanding people better or listening to people better, or I guess maybe being more a little flexible in your own decision making.
Yeah.
So, that he was like gifted in his just natural leadership. But I mean, there are people that you see in a company, younger ones who don't have those chops yet, who need some, guidance,
Yeah.
encouragement, wisdom, to keep on going to build their leadership abilities. And I encourage people to do that by saying yes to opportunities that present themselves, right? If the boss says, "Can you do this?" and perhaps you're a little scared, try it. That's how you grow. Sometimes when we're scared or have challenges, that's where we take the next step. And so if you keep stretching yourself and building these little building blocks in your career, then eventually, whatever, 5, 10 years down, you have a lot more leadership skills than you first did. So somebody who works in a company for say 20 years comes in as an analyst and comes out as CFO, they probably have a lot different leadership skills as they went along.
Yeah.
So I will say that's does happen, and it's nice for your a boss to pick out that person, but it's always that idea of like somebody needs to want the change for themselves and do it. Like, I want to get better at leadership, so I'm going to make it happen. And it's nice to have the boss as a encouragement and support to do it, but people got to make the change, whether it's leadership or communication or conflict resolution. If the person doesn't want to change and work on themselves, their change is probably pretty limited.
Let's speak to that conflict resolution aspect. if you are an exec and you're dealing with that as the boss and you have employees underneath you that don't want to do what you're asking them to do, and it's for the betterment of the company, what is your guidance and advice to get them to move forward? What happens next?
For the executive, it's obviously bringing the two parties together in a probably a room. I mean, I guess we do some text messages, but I don't encourage that. So in person's always helpful. If not that, video. So you could watch like body language of people. But I think for the executive who's kind of, I guess, somewhat the mediator, it's this idea. It's from this book I read many decades ago. The Seven Habits of Highly Effective
Yeah,
People from William Covey.
yeah, love it. Love that book.
Yeah, it's this idea of seek first to understand and then to be understood. So it goes back to that principle of listening to people. So trying to have each person express themselves to you and see where they're at. And then for the individuals in that meeting, it's kind of this idea of don't be afraid to express how you feel. And you don't have to be angry about it. You can just kind of present, your viewpoints very, very calmly and why you kind of view these things, you know, and why you'd want to take a certain approach. So it's kind of bringing the parties to the table and understanding them better and expressing them, having them express where they're kind of stuck at, and seeing if you could come to the compromise, right? Something that kind of is a win-win for both individuals, which doesn't always happen, but I mean, I guess that's somewhat of business. Decisions, hard decisions sometimes have to be made, and one person might win and one person might lose, but
Do you think there are moments where someone you you have a client and you see them in a position where they're doing that, they're trying to meet people halfway and get where it's a win-win for everyone, but the whole atmosphere doesn't allow that to happen? Is there a moment you're just like, it's not you anymore? It's you might need to go to a different company.
oh well, I guess moving on from people,
Yeah.
but I think it's always good to give them people a chance. Like I think if we're talking about the acute conflict resolution, I kind of frame it like, it should be more than one meeting, right? Plan a few meetings of how this is going to spill out, sit them down, talk to them a little bit, then have everybody go cool off, call a timeout,
Yeah.
take a day or a couple of days to think about it and come back, see if people have come up with new thoughts or what have you. And then keep progressing from there. I guess if you get into I guess the blocker where somebody's so entrenched in their way or still being hostile, then yeah, I mean, maybe you have to pivot and go a different direction.
Yeah.
And so,
Because I'm gonna guess that the higher the position and the more stressful it is, the harder it is to give up a little bit of yourself. I don't know if that is that correct to assume? Like for you to go, I'm gonna meet them further. I'm gonna meet them further because I feel like that position that you're in makes you feel like, well, I should be right. Right. If I'm the CEO of a large corporation, well, if I'm saying something, it should happen. Do you what is your advice for someone in that position?
it definitely ties into probably how they become CFO, right, or
Yeah.
CEOs. That confidence in themselves and the belief in themselves, right, that they were able to whatever take the role, lead the company whatsoever. And so there's a valid point that they've probably have made numerous good decisions in their life. So
Yeah.
why isn't this way the correct way this time, right? So you got to I mean, step back and say like, how important is this decision for me,
Yeah.
or is it better to take a lower profile to empower these employees to move forward or make different decisions? Does that help the culture and eventually make the business stronger, better?
Yeah.
Because there's other people who have that skill, and you know, I guess it's somewhat dialing down our own egos as we get higher
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
and just being yeah,
But
willing
that's
to.
gotta be hard to do, right? I'm guessing the higher up you go, the more you're gonna bring take your ego out of it, as you're achieving the status. Yeah.
It's the something that we've probably practiced many years and decades is kind of driving our own egos and, making decisions and being a leader. So it is like the more we practice something, the harder it is to get out of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If somebody's always used to being like stubborn, yeah, it probably takes a little bit of time to be flexible.
Yeah.
If somebody's used to making always the same their own decisions, yeah, it's probably hard to listen to other people's decisions, right?
Yeah. Is Do you think there is any big difference from someone who, for companies that are bringing up employees into higher positions that have been working with the company, they only like promote from within, as opposed to someone that gets pulled in from outside the company to become an exec in that position? You think there's a lack of connection overall when from one to the other?
I think you need to be totally aware of when you bring somebody in, how that affects the team that's
Mm.
around them, right? Are they going to are people going to feel like they've been looked over? Are people going to feel stressed because there's somebody coming in and telling them new ways to do it? So I'd definitely recommend to check out how that would affect the team dynamic and the individual people that's affected. Um, I've had like obviously various bosses when I had a corporate career. People came and go,
Yeah.
but always just try to do my job and run my people, the best I could. Even if the new boss wasn't totally aligned to how we do things or had their own ideas, I try to obviously keep the people going forward and try to have the boss kind of understand where we're coming from if it's somewhat different than what they kind of expected. Um, I will say, like, one of the things I thought I could have done better in my corporate life, and this one incident was like, I was putting people into new positions with promotions, right? It kind of ties back to leadership. And there's two guys, they're more like developers, programmers, two guys, and they did the same job. And I needed somebody to lead that group, and without going to reflect too much about who should be the leader. I just kind of went with the more vocal one and the one who spoke up more. So I gave him the role, but I affected the other person's
Mm.
attitude and his work ethic, and he was upset. And I totally understood that. And I could have done a better job talking to both of them ahead of time, seeing which ones would be a good leader and why, and have them presented on the table. So the other guy was more quiet and didn't take that leadership in meetings. But I guess it's the idea, don't judge a book by the cover, because maybe he had some other skills within him that weren't ferreted out the time.
Yeah.
So, but if I could go back, I'd do that differently and some, give them both chances. So if you want to bring somebody new in, at least interview your own people
Yeah.
and see where they stand. So
Eh, You think it's possible for someone to show no signs of leadership skills when they're at a entry level and then happen to be placed into that higher position, and then all of a sudden it all comes out? Does that happen?
it does happen. Like I think as an entry position, right, you still probably don't understand who you are professionally, personally, right? So you may not have that innate leadership abilities, right? Also, I mean, look, we sometimes put people on pedestal, bosses, C levels, like different people. So you have this natural kind of like, well, this isn't my spot to tell people what to do or whatever. So, but like to think as people kind of continue on their professional journey, they get more comfortable. I would say most, hopefully, bosses, C levels are somewhat accessible. I mean, they're all just people too. And if you could have a conversation with, you know, people you're intimidated by, it's a good starting point to kind of reduce that, putting them on a pedestal. It's a good way to kind of feel comfortable to understand maybe how they lead people. And then it's that idea, challenging yourself, finding the opportunity to take on a leadership role. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't like an innate leader
Yeah.
growing up or starting off. I mean, I started off at a startup, so there's a little bit more leeway to have a voice and have a clout. But as I drifted into like bigger companies, definitely a little bit different when you're
Yeah.
just the low man on the totem pole, but you get better at stuff. And, I guess people like you and you get promotions and they give you to do things and you just feel better. And then you sit in enough meetings and you're like, oh, I think I could do this. Then
Yeah.
you run a couple meetings and you just kind of get better at that. And, eventually you just keep on having these building blocks build and you feel all right to lead. So when they say, oh, can you run this group of people? You're like, yeah, I could do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've worked in corporate jobs where people have been promoted because of sales, which I've identified doesn't always make great leaders. And then you have people who you can sort of see that they have great leadership skills, but weren't great at sales. And I always wonder, why are companies not seeing that as often, right? Is it just because it's too hard to try to change the whole structure of promoting someone? Or do you think that we're a lot of corporations are in a culture that they don't appreciate just leadership skills outside of sales skills? Does that make sense?
The Yeah, well, I definitely think leadership and sales are somewhat, you know, both independent and also needed, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's hard to understand the psyche of every corporation, but I suppose sales are very shiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how much did you sell? Most corporations like that number, right? Oh, you did this amount, so oh, you must be doing something right, or oh, you could probably talk to our other salesmen and get them going, right? So it doesn't. I think they look at it that way. Whereas leadership, okay, maybe you're flying under the radar, or you're running projects, or whatever. You're solving problems, but I mean, maybe nobody ever measures that stuff,
Yeah.
right? Okay, well, maybe they deliver the project on time and under budget, but it's not like glossy,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's like kind of lost in translation what people bring to the table in that regard. The Obviously important for the leadership person to be able to be front facing. I guess it kind of depends what role they have. If they're running a team of people, are those customer facing? Probably helpful to have sales skills, building rapport, connecting with people, you know, um, chit chatting, whatever salespeople would do.
Yeah.
It's also good for salespeople to have, be able to relate to other people, be on a team, right? Collaborate, right? I guess motivate people, which might be a little bit different than selling products and services. I had this client who he hired a new guy and is somewhat an independent sales role, right? But he was doing a great job selling things, but he wasn't a great team player. Not that he had to be a leader or anything, but he kept on rubbing people the wrong way, whether it's people on the team or coworkers outside the department or the executives. So it was a difficult thing for my client to kind of corral this guy and kind of bring him back into the framework of the team, and eventually it just got to the point where he was such a lone wolf, decent sales, but he wasn't culturally favorable to the team or the company. So they had to move on from him.
Wow. Wow. And if you were to give advice to execs, maybe one or two things to always be working on that would make them better execs, what would those one or two things be?
I think that always goes back to understanding yourself. Who are you? What are you about? What improvements did you work on and you're getting better at? Are there still areas to improve? And, as I said, bring the unconscious to the conscious and kind of catch those and work on. So understanding oneself is the first thing to think about. Also, like this idea of balance in one's life, tend to all your identities, not just your professional identity. There's more to our human existence other than business and balance sheets and promotion. So tend to all parts of yourself. And then once you do that and understand yourself and have balance in your own life, that's something you can relate to your other people. Like could be your employees, right? Understanding them, seeing what they need, what motivates them, where they're trying to get to. But also if they're stressed, have them take a break, have them go on vacation, take a day off, take a couple hours for themselves. Just kind of build that kind of relationship and rapport where they feel safe and comfortable to talk to you, right? And they're able to walk into your office and bring something up. Most of the time it's professional, but sometimes there's a personal things that people get stuck on that's impacting their work. So the more you can relate to other people and understand them and have empathy for them, the better off you're going to be as the boss, but also your team will be better in your company in the long run.
Great, great. And let's kind of give some information if someone were to try to get into uh, being a psychologist right now, especially for business execs. Could you give some advice on what that path looks like now, and what you would, if you can go back to your younger self and give advice to yourself, what would that be?
So like to be a licensed psychologist, you have to have um a doctorate in psychology. So if you know that's something you want to do, it's probably usually a 5 year program, and you can kind of do that without getting the master's. So I got the master's and then a 3 year doctorate. So it's a little bit more efficient to take the 5 year approach and get your doctorate that way. Um, so with business, like, you know, I think it's helpful for a psychologist of all different styles, whether it's business or clinical, like symptoms of depression, anxiety, relationships, whatever anybody's working on. I think is this idea of experience of life, right? I mean, I had some business experience, but also life experience about, having jobs and, being independent and having responsibilities outside of life before I picked up any psychology diploma or license. So I think it's definitely helpful to have some experience, in life before you pursue degrees in psychology or try to work in the fields. The With business, like I'm kind of combining clinical psychology with executive leadership. I mean, they have also just the more industrial organizational relations kind of psychology, which is how to communicate and build interpersonal skills for your teams, like more kind of HR style. So that is a path as well as too. And so that's a distinct niche in the psychology world. So, but industrial psychologists kind of work on that regard. They probably hit on leadership too and organization. I like to go a little bit deeper to understand oneself by using psychodynamic principles, looking, as we said, from the some of those hiccups from childhood or young adult that might manifest nowadays. So, but the sort of the story to be, you know, to get into the psychology for business, obviously you need the educations, the license, you need to probably internship in that, and never underestimate just the general experience you get in life. And if you're going to work in business, maybe work in a company or a corporation or a startup for a while,
Yeah.
because you really get the effects of interpersonal dynamics in those regard.
Yeah. Great. And can you let our audience know what type of programs and assistance you provide for business execs?
I focus on one-on-one psychology for business leaders and executives, where we would meet and kind of review where they're at and where they'd like to go. Um, that's the main activity is building these counseling sessions. As I said, whatever weeks or months to get better and try to achieve some emotional and mental kind of growth areas for them and measuring them and see how they go and achieve those and move forward.
Yeah, great. And where can we find you on the internet?
So if you look at execpsychologyoc.com is a website about our discussion today. As I said, psychology for business leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, or anybody who wants to get better in their role by understanding themselves and other people. You could also call into the office at 949-354-4147, or you could look up Dr. Deke, Deke, Marcus, Marcus, and look at various pages about myself.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Dr. Marcus, for coming on the podcast. And this is the personal side of business.
Yeah, thank you, Jed. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed my time here, and hope we have future endeavors together.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.